Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Lesson from the Quran by thinker of the Quran, Allama Ahmad Parwez, R.A. Surah Al-Baqarah 2, verse 7. The issue of destiny and its solution. Dear brothers, today is June 30th, 1968, and we are studying the opening verses of the Quran in this new series. Today the 7th verse of Surah Al-Baqarah 2 will be under discussion. Khatamallahu ala qulubihim 2:7. Why does God himself seal the hearts of people and then punish them? In the previous verse, I explained that there are two verses whose meanings not being properly understood have created confusion in our tradition for centuries. One of them is, Innal lazina kafaru sawaun alayhim a anzartahum am lam tunzirhum la yuminun 2:6. Its common translation has been, as for those who disbelieve, it is the same for them whether you warn them or do not warn them, they will not believe. I had pointed out that according to this interpretation, the first difficulty arises, if the disbelievers will never believe, then the whole purpose of guidance seems meaningless. If they are disbelievers and will never believe, then the whole process of rushd or hidayat seems meaningless. But we clarified in the previous lesson that this is not the meaning. The phrase Innal lazina kafaru 2:6 refers to an act, something people do. Those who commit this act reach a state where they will never believe.
The next difficulty arises with the following verse. Khatamallahu ala qulubihim wa ala sam'ihim wa ala absarihim ghishawatun wa lahum adhabun azim. Why will they not believe? Because God has sealed their hearts. You can see how this translation creates confusion upon confusion. If disbelievers will not believe, then the whole system of guidance, God forbid, becomes pointless. Why will they not believe? Because Allah has sealed their hearts. And then it says, وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ عَظِيمٌ. For them is a great punishment. So Allah seals their hearts so they cannot believe, and then He punishes them. Why? A mistaken interpretation from centuries ago still influences minds today. I had explained that such difficulties arise only when the true meaning of the Quran is not understood. A person is left bewildered when he sees that centuries ago someone, being human and therefore capable of error, misunderstood the matter. That mistake was then carried forward by imitation. The authority became, the forefathers said so. Initially it was just one early scholar, Salaf, but as time passed, that one Salaf multiplied into many, Aslaf. Like a snowball, that small error grew into a massive burden. The further it rolled, the more weight and authority it gained. What was once the Salaf said this became the Aslaf have said this. One individual's understanding of the Quran cannot be proof for another, nor can the understanding of one age or era serve as proof and authority for a future age. For the Quran to be understood, human knowledge and insight are absolutely necessary. In the previous verse, which we studied in the last lesson, it was clarified that it is not the case that non-Muslims will never believe, or that it is the same whether you warn them or not. Here, the question is not about Muslims and non-Muslims. The real reason for seals on hearts is their own actions. Now comes the next point. Khatamullahu ala qulubihim. The matter is simple. It has been understood as those who disbelieve, who will not believe, do so because their hearts have been sealed. But if you turn this around, it is taken to mean, since their hearts are sealed, therefore it is the same whether you warn them or not. The cause of their disbelief is the seal. But what does this really mean? Why are their hearts sealed? We thought they disbelieved because their hearts were sealed. The Quran says their hearts are sealed because they disbelieve. Kufr is a positive attitude, a mindset, an action, a decision. One of its consequences is that it seals the heart. Seals are placed on hearts because of kufr. It is not that God first sealed their hearts and therefore they disbelieved. This is cause and effect across two verses. They do not disbelieve because Allah sealed their hearts. Rather, their hearts are sealed because they disbelieve. Quranic meaning of kufr, denial of truth after understanding. As explained earlier, whenever an individual does what the Quran has forbidden, he commits kufr. The first step is when he says, I will not use my reason or thinking. This is kufr. Whoever says, I do not want to think or reflect, for him it is the same whether you warn him or not. This refusal itself seals his heart, ending his capacity to think and reflect. So when I say their hearts are sealed because of their kufr, this is not my own logical conclusion. It is what the Quran itself states. The Quran explains itself through tasrif al-ayat, turning a matter around, repeating it, presenting it in different contexts, showing different aspects. This is the style of the entire Quran. Do not try to understand a verse in isolation. Look at what is said elsewhere about the same matter. This is the miracle of the Quran. When all related verses are brought together, no verse remains unclear, and its definite and precise meaning emerges. Today, people often say, yes, the text of the Quran is agreed upon, but its interpretations differ so much that this agreement on the text is meaningless. They claim the Quran becomes useless because of interpretive differences, but the Quran itself provides the method to resolve this. Tashrif al-ayat. The Quran's claim, no contradiction, no disagreement. God declares that if the Quran had been from anyone other than him, it would have contained many contradictions. The text itself is unanimously agreed upon. But if the nature of this text were such that every reader could interpret it however he wished, meaning that this book had a defect, God forbid, then what benefit would there be in its preservation and agreement? All these confusions arise because people do not look at the Quran itself. If one understands the Quran in the way it explains itself, these difficulties do not arise. Dear brothers, though my words may be small compared to the subject, I can say from a lifetime of experience in this field, there is not a single verse, not a single word in the Quran that it has not itself clarified. It can never have two contradictory meanings. As I was saying, the connection between the two verses is this. It is not that their hearts were sealed beforehand and therefore they disbelieved. Rather, because they disbelieved, their hearts became sealed. In other words, when they said, we do not wish to think or reflect, the result of this attitude was that gradually their capacity to think and reflect was destroyed. I did not reach this conclusion on my own. In Surah Al-Nisa, 4 verse 155, after mentioning the Jews and what they did, the Quran says, بَلْ تَبَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهَا بِكُفْرِهِمْ فَلَا يُؤْمِنُونَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. Rather, Allah sealed them because of their disbelief, so they believe only a few. See, they did not disbelieve because their hearts were sealed. Rather, their hearts were sealed because of their disbelief. Seals do not come first. Disbelief comes first. Now, regarding the claim that Allah sealed their hearts, I will clarify this further later. For now, understand this much. It happened because of their kufr. It was not that their hearts were sealed first, and therefore they disbelieved, leaving them unable to break the seal or to believe. That is not the case. The seals came because of disbelief. If they abandon disbelief, the seals will be broken. The greatest problem, destiny and the doctrine of compulsion. Because this verse appears so early in the Quran, it raises a very great issue, not only in religion, but in human thought and the philosophy of faith. This is the issue of taqdir, destiny. When you read, خَتَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ, Allah has sealed their hearts, it seems that man becomes utterly compelled, without choice. Allah sealed their hearts, and because of that, they disbelieved. Having disbelieved, it became the same whether they were warned or not, they would not believe. You can see how this leads directly to determinism, jabr. Man is no longer free. But notice what raises doubt in your mind, what makes you hesitate to accept this superficial meaning. It is not your own heart that created this hesitation. It is the Quran itself. The Quran says, وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ عَظِيمٌ. For them is a great punishment. Here, a thoughtful person must pause. If Allah sealed their hearts and they disbelieved because of that, then why does the Quran say they will face great punishment? These two ideas do not fit together. They are inconsistent. That would be injustice. But through reflection on the Quran, the true meaning emerges. They are punished not because Allah arbitrarily sealed their hearts, but because they themselves chose disbelief, and as a consequence, their hearts became sealed. If one passes over this verse superficially, one might think, yes, Allah seals hearts, and therefore they disbelieve. But then the logical conclusion is, if everything about each person is predetermined by God, who will believe, who will disbelieve, then all human effort, all striving, all work becomes meaningless. This is the doctrine of taqdir, predestination. It is the greatest and most ancient problem in religious thought. The deep conspiracy of making belief in destiny a part of faith. This belief that has been carried in our tradition is in fact the great misfortune of this nation. I say it was a very successful conspiracy against us that this doctrine was made a part of religion. It was said, وَالْقَدْرِ خَيْرِهِ وَشَرِّهِ مِنَ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. The Quran mentions 5 components of faith, only 5, throughout the entire Quran. Belief in Allah, belief in angels, belief in the books, belief in the messengers, and belief in the hereafter. But then man was brought under the doctrine of compulsion, jabr. A 6th component was added to the articles of faith. آمنت بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله واليوم الآخر والقدر خيره وشره من الله تعالى والبعث بعد الموت. Dear brothers, our new generation may not even know what this is. In earlier times, before partition, this was recited at the time of nikah. Even then, the groom had no idea what he was saying. I'm pointing out that the Quran mentions only 5 components of faith. Believing in them makes one a believer. Denying them makes one a disbeliever. But in our tradition, a 6th component was added. Fatalism, nasiba. Determinism, jabr. That man is utterly compelled. Everything comes from God. Everything is predetermined, written, and fixed in fate. When the situation is such that everything is already decreed, man has no choice or will, then he is no longer responsible for his actions. The whole outlook changes. This wrong concept of destiny deprived Muslims of willpower. This was the very thing that led to the downfall of this nation. The Muslim abandoned action, making destiny his excuse. That is why I said earlier that this matter is very delicate, very important, and must be understood clearly. The greatest gift of nature to man, choice and will. Dear brothers, life began from the earliest germ, passed through evolutionary stages, and finally reached the human form. At this stage, one great change occurred. Man was given a spark of divine energy. وَنَفَخَ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِهِ. The meaning of ruh here is not soul, but energy. This divine energy is what we call willpower, will, freedom. Before this stage, no living being had freedom of action or freedom of thought. All were bound by the chains of law. A goat's kid was born a goat and remained a goat until death. It had no capacity to change its condition. No creature had this ability. As the saying goes, wheat grows from wheat, barley from barley. Do not be heedless of the law of recompense. That was the condition before. But when life entered the human form, it received something that previously only God possessed, the ability to choose. That is the meaning of وَنَفَخَ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِهِ. No other creature is described this way in the Quran. The result was that man became capable of thinking, understanding, and making decisions. He was given hearing, sight, and intellect, the sources of knowledge. and then the power to decide, the mind. This is the unique feature of human life. When it reached the human form, it was endowed with choice and will. Man writes his own future. This is the very thing that makes man responsible for all his decisions. His future is not predetermined. He shapes his own future. His forehead is like a blank slate that comes from the past, and he himself writes upon it with his own hand. The Quran has beautifully resolved the issue of destiny for all humanity. On the subject of destiny, I will come at another time. For now, I present only one point from the Quran. I believe you are people of insight, and thanks be to Allah, you will understand this matter from a single verse. I say that if we had reflected upon this one verse, the entire issue of destiny would have been resolved. The question is my future in my own hands, or is it predetermined in such a way that I cannot change it? Is my future something I build myself, or is it already fixed with no possibility of alteration? I submit that if only one verse of the Quran were considered, this whole issue would be solved. That verse is from Surah Al-Hashr, verse 18, a very important verse. There are many other verses of this kind in the Quran, which I will present another day, but for now I present only this one. Does man build his own future, or is it already fixed? The Quran says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha. O you who believe, guard against Allah's laws. And then, وَلْتَمْذُرْ نَفْسٌ مَا قَدَّمَتْ لِغَدٍ. Let every soul consider what it has sent forward for tomorrow. Dear brothers, is the matter not clear in this one verse? The Quran uses the word qaddamat, which means to send something ahead for oneself. Whatever action a person does today, its result is formed later. Every result is preceded by an action. That action is like sending something ahead, and after a period of time, it appears in tangible form, but it was sent beforehand. Man's own actions shape his future. Look at this verse. وَلْتَنْظُرْ نَفْسٌ مَا قَدَّمَتْ لِغَدٍ. Every person should reflect on what he is sending today for his tomorrow. The matter is simple. One's future is shaped by what one does today. If it were already predetermined, then today's actions would be meaningless. I chose this verse because the Quran specifically says, ligadin, for tomorrow. Each person must keep in mind, what am I doing today to shape my tomorrow? In the presence of this one verse, the Quran's issue of destiny is resolved. Man himself shapes his future. Elsewhere, the Quran says, يَوْمَ يَنْظُرُ الْمَرْءُ مَا قَدَّمَتْ يَدَاهُ وَيَقُولُ الْكَافِرُ يَا لَيْتَنِي كُنْتُ تُرَابًا. On that day, man will see what his own hands sent forward, and the disbeliever will cry, would that I were dust. Here, the phrase قَدَّمَتْ يَدَاهُ makes it clear. His own hands had sent forward what shaped his future. He himself was sending it. And when one who denied the truth sees the future he himself prepared, he will cry out, would that I were dust, not a responsible human being. What is the difference between dust and man? Man too is made of clay, so why did the disbeliever wish to be dust? The difference is that dust has no choice, no will, and no responsibility. Its destiny is fixed. But man has choice, will, and responsibility. He shapes his own future. Man's own actions cause the transformation of his heart. The next point, even deeper and more important, is found in 61 verse 5. The story of the children of Israel is being narrated. They did this, they did that, and each action brought a consequence. Then comes a comprehensive statement, expressed as a principle. When they themselves turned away, Allah's law turned their hearts likewise. Notice here, the initiative is theirs. They took the first step. When they adopted this mentality, then their heart, the faculty that makes decisions, was overturned, and they themselves fell onto another track. That is the meaning of falamma zaghu, when they turned to the wrong path. So reflect. When Allah is mentioned here, I will explain why the Quran uses this expression. But the point is, when they themselves turned away, the inner faculty of decision-making, the power of thought and understanding, called qalb, was turned accordingly. The heart means human mentality and decision-making power. Dear brothers, the Quran says the same in other places. For example, look at 9 verse 127. There it is expressed in a different way. Then they turned away. Allah's law turned their hearts because they were a people who did not reflect. They abandoned reflection, understanding, and deep thought. By abandoning this, they turned to wrong paths, and when they adopted this way, then their inner mentality, their decision-making faculties, their capacities, which the Quran calls qalb or fuad, what we call the human mind, became molded accordingly. What happened? The kind of person one becomes, the inner faculties of decision-making also become shaped in that same mold. Whatever path he chooses, the abilities given to him begin to function in that direction. Remember, within man there is no built-in force that automatically takes him to good or evil. Even the distinction between good and evil, right and wrong, is not embedded in him. Man is given only faculties, potentialities. The next question is, how does he use these potentialities? The way he uses them determines the results, and accordingly his inner mentality is formed. On the first day when he thinks, I can gain something by deception, his heart does not immediately change. But once he adopts this path and daily continues to think along this line, his mentality gradually shifts. As people say, the conscience dies. Slowly, his inner faculties of thought and decision-making carry him along that track. He begins to decide, where shall I deceive? And his inner faculties suggest methods of deception, ways to justify it, reasons to defend it. If caught, they suggest strategies to escape, and so the process continues.
If a nation wants to change its condition, it must first change its psychology. You have seen, فَلَمَّا زَاغُوا, when they adopted a certain path, then their inner faculties themselves followed that path. This principle, which applies to individuals, the Quran also extends to nations. It says, remember, this is a fundamental law. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُوا مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Allah does not change the condition of a people until they change what is within themselves. This means God does not alter the state of a nation until that nation itself brings about an internal transformation. A nation's condition deteriorates or improves depending on the kind of change it produces within itself. External factors, material resources, means and tools are important, but they do not constitute the true transformation of a nation's condition. True change comes from the inner transformation of the people. The type of psychological change within a nation, the mentality it develops, the character and conduct of its individuals, all of these shape the external condition of that nation. The same principle applies to individuals. This principle applies equally to individuals. The kind of mentality a person develops within himself determines the results of his actions. In other words, the kind of person one becomes, God's law follows accordingly. God's laws are active throughout the universe.
God's law is that fire burns. If a person puts his finger into fire, then God's law applies to him. Fire burns. If he does not put his finger in, God's law remains in its place but does not apply to him. This matter needs to be understood deeply. I will try to explain it repeatedly. God's laws are active throughout the universe.
The question is, which particular law of God applies to a particular individual or a nation? For example, a person who walks regularly, maintains healthy habits, and observes the laws of health, God's law applies to him that his health remains good. A person who consumes poison, God's law applies to him that death begins to occur. The kind of person one makes of himself determines which law of God applies to a person or a nation. God's laws exist. Which law applies to a person or a nation depends on what kind of person or nation they become.
Iqbal's expression of this principle. Iqbal, 1877-1938, expressed this in his own style. He said, Ramz barikish be harfe muzmarast. The secret of destiny is subtle, but hidden in a single word. And that word is, Tu agar digar shavi, u digarast. If you change, destiny changes. This was the method nature gave him to explain. The subtlety of destiny lies in this. If you change yourself, destiny itself changes. From Plato's time, 428 to 347 BCE, until today, countless writings have been produced on the issue of compulsion, jabr, and destiny, qadr. Philosophers tried to untangle the knot, but never found the end. Yet Iqbal said, the matter is resolved in a single word. Tu agar digar shavi, u digarast. Quranic foundation of Iqbal's thought. Where did Iqbal take this from? From the Quran. Inna Allaha la yugayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yugayyiru ma bi anfusihim. Allah does not change the condition of a people until they change what is within themselves. And also, falamma zagu azagallahu kulubahum. When they turned away, Allah turned their hearts likewise. Thus, destiny means the kind of person you become, the corresponding law of God applies to you. Tu agar digar shavi, u digarast. If you change, destiny changes. Illustrations of destiny changing with self-change. Hak sho nezre hawa sazat tara. If you become dust, then any gust of wind will carry you away. Sang sho bar shisha andazat tara. If you become stone, you will shatter every glass. This shows how destiny changes with your own transformation. Shabnami aftandagi takdire tast. If you are dew, then your destiny is to fall downward into the lowlands. Kalzami payandagi takdire tast. If you are the ocean, then your destiny is permanence. Seeking a new destiny. Iqbal continues, why lament? Garzik takdire khun gardad jigar. If one destiny makes your heart bleed, brings hardship and distress, khwahe az hak hukme takdire digar, then ask God for another destiny. If one divine destiny brings suffering, choose another. Tu agar takdire nao khwahi rawast. If you desire a new destiny, it is permissible. Choose another destiny, because zanke takdirate haq la intihast. God's destinies are without limit. Thus, if you wish to change destiny, seek a new one, for God's destinies are infinite. Prayer cannot change cosmic law. Man must change himself according to law. God's countless laws are already established. If one particular law is applying to you and you see that it is bringing grief or hardship, then instead of remaining as you are and letting that law continue to apply, you should adopt another law. The existing law will not leave you because it follows you according to what you are. That is why it is called ukubat, from akab, meaning to follow behind. God's law follows man. If one law is causing pain, then turn toward another law, and that law will follow you. It is not wrong to desire another destiny. God has infinite destinies. The problem is that you sit content with one destiny and then begin to weep. You continue on the wrong path, blistered feet, complaining, yet never changing the path. Then you say, Allah has written this, so I must walk this path. If so, then why lament?
If illness is fixed, then why seek treatment? Dear brothers, these are confusions. Even the educated are caught in them. They say, illness comes by God's decree,
And if he has written that it will come and depart on a certain day, then why seek treatment? If fever is written to end after 3 days, then asking a doctor for an injection to end it by evening is considered fighting with God. See how one wrong step leads to absurd conclusions. The Quran's principle of change. The Quran says, Allah does not change the condition of a people until they change what is within themselves. Change yourself, and then God's law will change, another law will apply. Every atom of the universe is dependent on God's destinies. The Quran says, when they turned away, Allah turned their hearts likewise. When they changed themselves, then our law that follows change applied to them. These are the destinies of God. For every state, every decision, every mentality, there is a corresponding law. With every breath, another law comes into effect. With every breath, another destiny unfolds. Zan ke taqdeerat-e haq la intihast. God's destinies are without limit. The initiative, however, is in your hands. Remember this. How seals on hearts occur. Earlier we discussed, Khatam Allahu ala qulubihim. Allah has sealed their hearts. The first point was, seals are placed because of disbelief. The connection between the verses is now clear. Hearts are sealed because of disbelief, not that Allah sealed them beforehand, so they were born disbelievers and died disbelievers. Now let us look at more verses to see how seals occur. The Quran says, Allah created the heavens and the earth with truth. The purpose of the universe. What is the purpose of the creation of the universe? The Quran answers, so that every soul may be recompensed for what it has earned, and none shall be wronged. Thus, the entire system of the universe is in motion so that every individual receives the exact result of his deeds. Conclusion. Dear brothers, in the presence of these verses, how can it be correct to say that everything is predetermined and man bears no responsibility? The Quran makes it clear. God's laws are infinite, but which law applies depends on man's own choices. Seals on hearts are the result of disbelief, not its cause. The earth was created with purpose, to ensure every soul receives the just outcome of its actions. This is the Quranic resolution of the issue of destiny. Responsibility lies with human initiative.
How do seals on hearts occur? By following one's desires blindly. Now let us move forward. How do seals get placed on hearts? The Quran says, أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ. Have you seen the one who takes his own desires as his God? This is the person who becomes a slave to his passions. He is overwhelmed by his own impulses. No law, no permanent values, no reason or thought. This is hawa. The meaning of hawa. In Arabic, the word hawa carries the sense of something descending from heights to depths. Imagine dropping a stone from the top of a mountain. As it rolls downwards, its own momentum increases and its speed accelerates. This downward plunge is hawa. The Arabs chose this word to describe human emotions. What an insight! At first, when one begins to follow desires, the pace is slow, almost imperceptible. But as one continues, the momentum builds. The pull of desire grows stronger and stronger until it becomes so rapid that stopping midway becomes extremely difficult. The ideological arguments of Western civilization, their rebellious emotions, and the outcome. God's command is,
Have you considered the state of the one who makes his base desires his God? وَأَضَلَّهُ اللَّهُ عَلَى عِلْمٍ. And Allah lets him go astray despite knowledge. The result is that even with knowledge and insight, they walk on the wrong path. Look especially at those who make emotions their God, whether it is our intellectual class or the intellectual nations of the world. Take the West as an example. They appear to be the most scholarly and intellectual people. Listen to their arguments on platforms or in universities. They present logical proofs with conviction and firmness. Yet look at their lives. They are blindly chasing their own interests. The Quran says, despite knowledge and insight, they become blind. وَخَتَمَ عَلَى سَمِعِهِ وَقَلْبِهِ. And Allah has sealed their hearing and their hearts and placed a covering over their eyes. After this law of God, who can guide them to the right path? How seals are placed on hearts. Seals occur when one makes his emotions his God. After that, the ability to think, reflect, and make sound decisions is lost. The Quran mentions a specific group of that time. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَسْتَمِعُ إِلَيْكَ حَتَّى إِذَا خَرَجُوا مِنْ عِنْدِكَ قَالُوا لِلَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ مَاذَا قَالَ آنِفًا. Among them are those who listen to you, but when they leave your presence, they ask those who have knowledge, what was it he just said? Such listeners, the Quran says, أُولَئِكَ الَّذِينَ طَبَعَ اللَّهُ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ. These are the ones whose hearts Allah has sealed. Why does this happen? They sit in gatherings, hear the words, but their thoughts are elsewhere. Physically, their ears function, but spiritually, they do not hear. It's as if a plug blocks the sound from entering. What is this plug? وَاتَّبَعُوا أَهْوَاءَهُمْ. They follow their own desires. Because they are always thinking of their own interests, even what enters their ears does not reach their hearts. The Quran's clear answer. Another verse makes the matter completely clear. كَلَّا بَلْ رَانَ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ مَا كَانُوا يَكْسِبُونَ. Nay, the rust upon their hearts is from what they themselves used to earn. Thus, the deeds they commit become rust on their hearts. This is what is described as the seal placed by God. The doctrine of compulsion, that God alone does everything, that everything happens by His will, and man is utterly powerless to change anything, is not new. It did not originate only among Muslims after Islam. It is an old belief carried forward from earlier times. This doctrine provides a wide avenue for escapism, a way to avoid responsibility. If thousands of accusations are made against you, the answer is simply, it is God's will. What can we do after that? At most, it is expressed in words like this. Gunah agarche nabud ikhtiyare ma hafiz, tu dar tariq e adab kush wagu gunahe manast. Meaning, sin is not really my responsibility. It is not due to my choice, but due to God. Yet, since it has occurred, out of respect, you should say, yes, I committed it. This is called respect for God. But what kind of respect is this? It is like confessing guilt at a police station, merely for formality. Escapism in the name of divine will. This doctrine persisted because it offered escape from responsibility. Even in the time of the Quran, this mentality existed. The Quran says, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ أَنْفِقُوا مِمَّا رَزَقَكُمُ اللَّهُ. When they are told, spend from what Allah has provided for you, meaning establish a system so that no one remains hungry, and the provisions God has given for life are distributed so that everyone receives them. But the disbelievers said to the believers, أَنُطْعِنُ مَنْ لَا يَشَاءُ اللَّهُ أَطْعَمَهُ. Shall we feed those whom Allah wills to remain hungry?
If he had willed, he would have fed them himself. Should we fight against God's will? See how the Quran distinguishes between disbelief and faith. The disbelievers used God's will as an excuse to avoid responsibility. Later, when Islam itself was diverted onto another track, even believers began to say the same thing. This all happens by His will. The Quran responds, "In antum illa fi dalalin mubin." You are in clear error. Worship of false gods justified by divine will. Another verse says, وَقَالُوا لَوْ شَاءَ الرَّحْمَنُ مَا عَبَدْنَاهُمْ. They say, if the Most Merciful had willed, we would not have worshipped them. When asked, why worship idols, visit shrines, or make humans into gods, why adopt servitude to others besides God, they reply, if God had not willed it, how could we do it? It is His will that we worship them. These are the very words we repeat from morning to evening, and the more someone repeats them, the more pious and close to God he is considered, content with fate. But the Quran says, مَا لَهُمْ بِذَلِكَ مِنْ عِلْمٍ. They have no knowledge of this. And, إِنْ هُمْ إِلَّا يَخْرُصُونَ. They are only conjecturing. Thus, the Quran exposes this doctrine of compulsion as mere conjecture and escapism, a way to justify irresponsibility. True faith requires action and responsibility, not hiding behind God's will as an excuse.
Logical arguments versus the contradictions of daily life. Inside, the reality is something else, but for that, they keep fabricating logical arguments. Yet, if you ask them directly, in the practical field of life from morning to evening, they never say such things. If someone tries to snatch something from them, they never say, yes, God had written this for him, so he took it. No, they catch his hand, take him to the police station. If they fall ill, they go for treatment. If someone commits fraud, they go to the law. See the contradiction. In theory, they say one thing, but in practice, they do another. The Quran describes this beautifully. بَلْ قَالُوا إِنَّا وَجَدْنَا آبَاءَنَا عَلَى أُمَّةٍ وَإِنَّا عَلَى آثَارِهِمْ مُهْتَدُونَ. They say, we found our forefathers upon a community and we are guided by their footsteps. So they justify it by saying, our forefathers did this, we do the same. They assume their ancestors understood the Quran better, so following them is guidance. End of discussion. The excuse of divine will. Another verse says, سيقول الذين أشركوا لو شاء الله ما أشركنا ولا آباؤنا ولا حرمنا من شيء. Those who associate partners will say, if Allah had willed, neither we nor our forefathers would have associated partners nor forbidden anything. When asked, why do you adopt shirk? They reply, if God had willed otherwise, we would not have done it. It is His will. The Quran's response. Dear brothers, see the powerful style. It says, كَذَلِكَ كَذَّبَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ. Thus did those before them deny the truth. This is not new. Previous nations also denied reality in the same way. They said, God willed it, so we do it. But what happened? حَتَّى ذَاقُوا بَأْسَنَا. Until they tasted our punishment. If their wrong actions were truly God's will, then why did they suffer the consequences? The fact that they were punished proves that divine will did not compel them to act wrongly. The Quran challenges them. قُلْ هَلْ عِنْدَكُمْ مِنْ عِلْمٍ فَتُخْرِجُوهُ لَنَا. Say, do you have any knowledge to produce for us? Do not rely on ancestral tradition. Bring evidence from knowledge. إِن تَتَّبِعُونَ إِلَّا الظَّنَّ وَإِنْ أَنْتُمْ إِلَّا تَخْرُصُونَ. You follow nothing but conjecture. You are only guessing. Conclusion. The contradiction. People excuse wrong actions by invoking God's will, yet in daily life they act responsibly, seeking justice, treatment, and law. The Quran exposes this as denial of truth, not genuine faith. Punishment itself is proof that divine will does not force wrongdoing. Knowledge never supports this doctrine of compulsion. It is mere conjecture.
Faith, being higher than knowledge, cannot support what knowledge itself rejects.
The story of Iblis and Adam in the Quran, the essence of human history. The story of Iblis and Adam, as narrated in the Quran, is in fact the summary of the entire human history. The Quran presents it in just a few words with utmost clarity. Adam was given a command. He slipped. He disobeyed. When asked about his action, he admitted, رَبَّنَا ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا وَإِن لَّمْ تَغْفِرْ لَنَا وَتَرْحَمْنَا لَنَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. Our Lord, we have wronged ourselves. If you do not forgive us and have mercy on us, we will surely be among the losers. Adam acknowledged his mistake, accepted responsibility, and confessed his error. Because he accepted responsibility, the possibility of reform and renewal was opened for him. He was told, "Go, correct your mistake, repair the damage, and you can succeed." The attitude of Iblis. Iblis was also given a command. He disobeyed. When asked why, he replied, قال فبما أغويتني لأقعدن لهم صراطك المستقيم. Because you misled me, I will lie in wait for them on your straight path. Iblis did not admit his mistake. He did not accept responsibility. Instead, he blamed another, in this case, God himself. He said, "You made me do this. I did not do it myself." The principle of responsibility. This is why the Quran declares, for Iblis there is no possibility of reform. Renewal is possible only for those who accept responsibility for their actions. Adam admitted his fault, so reform was possible. Iblis denied responsibility, shifted blame, and therefore reform was impossible. This is not about God being angry or pleased. It is about law. Whoever accepts responsibility can correct himself. Whoever denies responsibility and blames others, saying, "God made me do this, I cannot change," cannot reform. Adamic versus Satanic mentality. Thus, Iblis is eternally hopeless because he refuses to acknowledge responsibility. Hopelessness belongs to those for whom reform is impossible. Reform is impossible for those who never admit their fault and always shift blame. This is the difference. Adam's way, Adamiyat, admitting responsibility, opening the door to correction and renewal. Iblis's way, Iblisiyat, denying responsibility, blaming others, closing the door to reform. Dear brothers, the matter is crystal clear. The meaning of declaring God as the doer in human affairs and the importance of kalimatillah. The question arises when the Quran says, Khatamallahu ala qulubihim, God has sealed their hearts. What does it mean? Misunderstanding this has created many confusions. We directly declare God as the doer, saying, God does this. That is correct, but the Quran explains that God acts through laws he has established. وَلَن تَجِدَ لِسُنَّةِ اللَّهِ تَبْدِيلًا. You will never find any change in the way of God. God acts, but how? For example, he created the property of fire to burn and water to soothe. This was his will, his plan. He was free to choose, but once he created these properties, they became fixed laws. Fire burns, water cools. These are called kalimatillah, God's words, meaning defined laws. So if someone puts his finger in fire, it will burn. This is sunnatillah, meaning the law as applied. Whenever the condition is met, the law operates. وَلَا مُبَدِّلَ لِكَلِمَاتِ اللَّهِ. There is no one who can change the words of God. Thus, kalimatillah are the defined laws,
and sunnatillah is the way those laws operate. Neither can be changed. The difference between law and command. God's law means how the will of God operates in this universe. It is the mode of His will, His plan, His intention functioning in creation. The Quran says this mode never changes. A command can change from time to time, but a law is a command that never changes. That is why natural processes are called laws. For example, sun's heat evaporates water from the sea, forming clouds. Clouds rise because vapor is lighter than air. Winds move them. When cooled, vapor condenses into water. Water, being heavier than air, falls as rain. This is God's law of rain.
God's will means God's law. All these processes are laws of God. The Quran says rain falls by God's permission. Idhan means law. Thus, rain falls according to God's defined laws of nature. So, when the Quran says God sends rain, the meaning is God sends rain according to His law. If you insert the phrase according to His law into such statements, all confusion disappears. God sends rain. God sends rain according to His law. God makes one sick. God makes one sick according to His law. God heals. God heals according to His law. God causes death. God causes death according to His law. Man has already been granted the capacity to acquire cosmic knowledge. Dear brothers, do you still feel any confusion in this matter? But why does the Quran state this explicitly? There is something profound here. Materialists hold a concept known as the materialistic concept. They too say that everything in the universe happens according to laws, the laws of nature. They claim to have discovered these laws. The Quran itself says, "We taught Adam the names of all things." This means that man was given the capacity to acquire knowledge of the laws of nature. The materialist, however, stops there. He says everything operates under these laws, and that is the end of the matter. Behind them, the idea of God is false. The universe came into existence somehow, he says, and human thought cannot go beyond a certain point. When pressed, he simply says it came into being somehow. The result is that when he turns to human society, he finds no laws beyond physical ones. The laws of nature operate in the physical world, but for the human world he sees no laws. Therefore, he concludes, man is free in this sphere and can make whatever laws he pleases. And the result of this you can see in the state of the world today. Law requires an enforcing power. The Quran first makes clear God acts according to His laws. Sometimes it says rain falls by God's permission. Sometimes it says God sends rain. Why? To firmly impress upon the human heart that law by itself has no power. There must be a force that enforces the law, making it operate consistently. Do not stop at the law itself. Recognize that behind the law is a power. The universe was created, but to sustain it requires immense power. Every moment its needs must be met, provisions supplied, processes of evolution maintained. Behind all this is a sustaining force. When God attributes actions to Himself, it is to prevent the false notion that laws exist on their own without any source. He instills in the believer's heart the conviction that these laws are His creation, and He sustains them. Implication for human society. Thus, when man reflects on the universe, he is compelled to think, if every part of creation operates under God's laws and no thing has made laws for itself, then surely human society also has laws, laws that man did not create for himself, but which God has established for human life. No creature in the universe held a meeting to legislate its own laws. Dear brothers, it never happened that goats
held an all-world goat conference and unanimously resolved, "We shall eat only grass, not meat." Fire never sat down to decide, "I will burn." Water never declared, "I will flow downward." These laws were not self-made by these entities. Just as the external universe has fixed laws, human life too cannot create its own constitution. A believer who accepts that natural laws are not self-made must also accept that human life cannot be governed by laws invented by man himself. To think otherwise would contradict the principle of nature. Nature itself suggests that no entity can legislate laws for its own existence. When creatures live according to the laws set for them, they enjoy peace, security, and growth. No harm occurs, development continues, harmony prevails. Problems arise only when those laws are violated. The condition of man when he claims freedom from divine law. If man assumes that no laws exist for him and that he can legislate his own, then he has contradicted nature. When he makes his own laws, he also breaks them whenever he wishes. He applies them selectively, bends them for personal gain, and discards them at will. For example, he may devise laws that allow him to seize another's wealth through fraud and enjoy it. This is his self-made law. But there are laws he did not create, such as the law that poison, arsenic, kills. If he consumes it, he cannot change its effect. Because that law was not his invention, it was established by a higher power that enforces it universally at all times for all people. By contrast, human-made laws are inconsistent. One law for himself, another for others. One for his party, another for opponents. One for his nation, another for others. He changes them whenever he pleases. The way of the believer. A believer, however, accepts that no entity can create its own laws. Laws are given. Therefore, he believes that human life, too, must be governed by laws received from the same source that governs natural life. These laws must be immutable, applying equally to all humans, producing consistent results everywhere. This is the principle that leads man to the conclusion, just as the laws of nature are God-made, so too must the laws of human life be God-made. When the Quran says, "Fire burns, rain falls," and attributes these actions to God, it is to remind us, understand that God acts according to his laws. The purpose is to impress upon us that our human life also requires divine law, applied uniformly, not suspended by human whims. Two sovereignties cannot coexist. Man may choose whether to eat poison or not, but he cannot change its effect. A goat has no choice to eat grass or meat, hence no corruption occurs there. Human life is governed by immutable laws just like the external universe. In human life, laws are also immutable. Man has been given the choice to follow them or to violate them. Arsenic kills. This is fixed. A glass of water quenches thirst. This is fixed. The same water, if one drowns in it, causes death. This too is fixed. These laws are not man-made. He only has the choice to act in accordance with them or against them, but the law itself produces its result. Exactly the same applies to human life. The Quran says, إِنَّهُ لَا يُفْلِحُ الظَّالِمُونَ 6:21. Indeed, the wrongdoers will never prosper. This is a law as immutable as the law that one who eats arsenic cannot survive. Man has the choice to commit injustice or uphold justice, but after committing injustice, he cannot escape its consequences, just as one cannot escape the deadly result of consuming poison. This is the wisdom for which the Quran describes all matters under divine law, saying, God does this, God does that. God's will means God's law. explained by His wisdom. As I have said, to understand correctly, you should always translate Mashiat, God's will, as God's law. It does not mean He acts arbitrarily at every moment. It means He has made laws according to His plan, and He acts through them. وَلَن تَجِدَ لِسُنَّةِ اللَّهِ تَبْدِيلًا 33:62. You will never find any change in the way of Allah. Thus, when the Quran says, ختم الله على قلوبهم وعلى سمعهم وعلى أبصارهم غشاوة 2:7, Allah has sealed their hearts, their hearing, and placed a covering over their eyes. The meaning is, God's law operates in such a way that their faculties of understanding, thinking, and decision-making become paralyzed. Why does this happen? The Quran itself explains, because of their own violations of divine law. Every divine action is linked to law. Dear brothers, in the Quran there is nothing attributed to God without also being explained as law. For example, He gives sovereignty to whom He wills. He provides sustenance to whom He wills. When we translate, we say, God gives, but always remember, wherever the Quran says God does, elsewhere it explains that this happens according to His law. So when it says, ختم الله على قلوبهم 2:7, God sealed their hearts, it appears as if God arbitrarily seals hearts. But in at least 6 other verses, the Quran explains how seals occur through violations of His laws. Thus, it is not that God seals hearts at whim. Rather, when man violates God's law, he himself seals his heart, his mind, his faculties. And once he has sealed them, it makes no difference whether others warn him or not. He no longer wishes to understand. Wrong translations of the Quran prevented the Muslim Ummah from rising to the forefront of nations. Dear brothers, this is the reality of this important issue according to the Quran. Its wrong interpretation has not only destroyed individuals among us, but paralyzed the entire nation for 1,000 years, preventing it from living among the ranks of vibrant nations. Today we discussed verse 7 of Surah Al-Baqarah. After that it says, وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ عَظِيمٌ 2:7. They will have a great punishment. In the next lesson, I will explain what the meaning of adhab is, what it actually signifies. We have understood adhab to mean something that begins either on the day of judgment or at the very least from the grave onwards. We have postponed it to the next world, not considered it in this world. I will explain what adhab means according to the Quran, how it comes, how it manifests in this world, how it manifests in the life after death, and what the Quran means when it says adhab azim, great punishment. After that, we will take up the third category that concerns us. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَقُولُ آمَنَّا بِاللَّهِ وَبِالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَمَا هُمْ بِمُؤْمِنِينَ 2:8. And among mankind are those who say, we believe in Allah and the last day, but they are not believers. Let us bring this category forward. Those who morning and evening declare that they have faith, but in reality they are not believers. Dear brothers, we will take this up in the next lesson. رَبَّنَا تَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. Our Lord, accept from us. Indeed, you are the all-hearing, the all-knowing.